Hello children and welcome back to your online class. Today I am going to teach literature to the students of standard 7. In my last video I told you about the author of this chapter Achilles, and in brief I tried to explain it to you what this chapter is all about, the whole story in brief I had said. Now here we'll do line by line in detail. Now this story is about a young boy and his pet tortoise named Achilles. Now, do you know who Achilles was? So, as I had told you that Achilles was a brave Greek hero according to Greek mythology. When Achilles was born, his mother held him by his heel and dipped him in the river Styx so that he could live forever. As his heel was the only part of his body and was not washed by the holy water, he was vulnerable only on his heel. Now, years later, after surviving many battles, Achilles finally died after an arrow pierced his heel, because only that part which was held, because that Greek hero was held by his heel, and that only was not dipped in river Styx. That is why when the arrow pierced his heel, he died. Otherwise, he would not have died. So, Achilles is an idiom which means a single weakness in an otherwise strong person or thing. Okay, so single weakness in a strong person or thing. And this name the narrator chose to give his pet tortoise. Now see, perhaps one of the most weird and fascinating characters I met during my travels was the rose beetle man. So the author is trying to tell us in the very opening sentence that what he saw in rose beetle man, that he was so much fascinated by. He had a fairy tale air about him that was impossible to resist, and I used to look forward eagerly to my meetings with him. So he had heard much about the rose beetle man, so he wanted to meet him. I first saw him on a lonely road leading to one of the remote mountain villages. I could hear him long before I could see him. That means he could hear him from far away. Till now he did not see him, but he could hear him because he was playing a tune in his flute. For he was playing a rippling tune on a shepherd's pipe, breaking off now and then to sing a few words in a curious nasal voice. So, certain typical voice he made, and that was heard from far away. Then, see about his appearance here. He had a fox-like face with large eyes. His dress was fantastic. On his head was a hat with a wide floppy brim. You can see here in this picture. His shirt was worn. Round his neck dangled a cravat of startling blue satin. So you can see with this he has made how in his neck he has worn around it, and it is just attracting the person who sees it. Round his neck dangled a cravat of startling blue satin. The pockets of his coat bulged out. The pockets were as if it will come out. They all were bulged out. The contents almost spilling out because they were stuffed with so many things as if it will come out. This extraordinary character carried on his back bamboo cages here. Bamboo cages full of pigeons and young chickens and several mysterious sacks. So what things he was carrying with him? With one hand he held his pipe on his mouth. In the other hand were held a number of lengths of cotton, to each of which was tied an almost almond-sized rose beetle. Here you can see rose beetle. They were tied to it, glittering golden green in the sun. All of them flying around his hat, trying to escape from the thread tied firmly around his waists. So all of them were tied together and it was then tied to his waist. Occasionally tired of circling round and round without success, one of the beetles would settle for a moment on his head. So the beetles actually tried to fly and move away, but as it was tied, they could not. So they were tired and they would sit for some time on his hat before launching itself off once more on its endless merry-go-round. So again to go round and round. When he saw, when the narrator saw Roger, when he saw Roger, my bad, the narrator is saying, see here, this small boy, narrator is saying that when the rose beetle man saw his pet dog Roger, the rose beetle man stopped, took off his ridiculous hat and swept up a low bow. So as if he greeted him. He smiled at us, put on his hat again, raised his hands and waggled his long bony fingers at me. I asked him if he had been to some fiesta. That means if he had been to any festival, because the appearance and all things he had carried, he thought that he must have gone to some typical place, for something very particular. He nodded his head vigorously. He just nodded his head continuously and raised his pipe to his lips and played a lilting tune on it, and then stopped and jerked his thumb over his shoulder, pointing back the way he had come. So he just showed from where he had come, but he did not speak a single word. He smiled and rubbed his forefinger and thumb together, expressing that he wanted money. So he rubbed his forefinger and thumb together, and that showed that he wanted money. I suddenly realized that he must be unable to speak because he was telling everything in gestures. So standing in the middle of the road, I carried on a conversation with him, and he replied with a clever pantomime. You can see the meaning of pantomime, dramatic entertainment. Originating in Roman mime, in which performance express meaning through gestures and facial expressions accompanied by music. So he thought that he was here trying to replying with a clever pantomime, without speaking anything, but the message was conveyed. I asked what the rose beetles were for. He held his hand out to denote small boys, took one of the lengths of cotton from which a beetle hung and whirled it rapidly round his head. Immediately the insect came to life and started on its planet like circling. So as he moved around, all those insects tried to fly and go in a circle. Pointing up at the sky, he stretched his arms out and gave a deep nasal buzzing. So he brought a kind of sound from his nose. Then he whirled his beetles round his head so that they all started to buzz quickly. And on hearing this, they also all together started to buzz quickly. So in this video, we'll do till here. In my next video, I'll continue with this chapter.